it's whatever your true identity of like what you want to be. And if that true identity isn't what you're doing, irrespective of the work, you can be doing different, and many people do, they switch careers many times in their lives, but it's who you are that should be as true to yourself as possible. And if that's the case, then great. And if your day job makes you feel like that, great. If it doesn't, then reevaluate that. And maybe it comes in a form of doing a completely different job. It comes in following your passion and making that into a full-time job. But I think just being authentic and true to yourself as far as your why of what does this mean about me.
Welcome to Flourish or Fold, Stories of Resilience. This is where well-known people have the opportunity to share their lesser well-known stories of resilience. And boy, do we have a delicious dish of a conversation for you. We have with us today Chef Palak Patel. She's had an incredible, illustrious food career and has won important network television series like Chopped and Beat Bobby Flay. And I feel so excited, so fortunate, so delighted to have Chef Palak here with me today. And here's a little peek behind the resilience curtain. Chef Palak is also one of my dearest friends and best and most wonderful women in my life. Welcome, Chef Palak.
Thank you, Taryn. And you are one of my favorite people and dear friends and my inspirational she-male that I have in my inner circle. So thank you.
Well, it's so wonderful to have you here with us today. I know you and I have had so many incredibly powerful, life-changing, life-altering conversations between the two of us. And I'm excited to get to give our listeners a little peek into some of that dialogue and how we think about the experience of challenge, change, complexity, resilience, following our dreams, developing the life that we want, what it means to create and manifest. There's so many wonderful elements that we could talk about. And what I wanted to do and what's characteristic to our show is to really give this platform as an opportunity for you to share a significant and meaningful and poignant challenge that you faced and how that challenge has formed you into the woman that you are today.
Beautiful. I love that. And behind, I guess, every success, there's always challenges and there's always perseverance and the pedaling underwater, I guess, that you don't see. So definitely I have no shortness of that in my career. I think the story that really comes to mind is going back to working in corporate for 15 years. I always wanted to be a chef. I would dream about quitting my job, cooking all the time and being around food, being around people. And I started looking at culinary schools. At the time I lived in San Francisco, looked at schools there, and it just wasn't the right time. And I was young in my career and it's like, how am I going to live in San Francisco and still be able to have the lifestyle that I want and go to culinary school without working? So kind of pushed that to the side, worked another, I don't know, a good 8 years until I got moved to New York. And then when I was in New York, I did the same thing, online. Maybe I can teach part time. There's got to be some way that I can get into culinary school. And when I was in New York, I found a program, luckily, and this program happened to be at night. So this was perfect, I thought, I would go to work during the day. I would just hack it out at night. It was a year-long program. It was perfect. And so I went to the school for orientation, and I start kind of getting all the paperwork. And to go to school in New York, it's not cheap. Any kind of culinary arts program, it's pretty significant. It was $40,000 at the time,
Mm.
and compiled with living in New York and just, going back to school and being a student again. I remember not having, like, my parents were totally against it at the time, so they wouldn't sign my loan because I couldn't take out a loan.
Mhm.
I was able to pay for school, but not all up front. And I had no collateral at the time. And I remember asking my uncle what he signed for the loan, and he was like, no, he's like, I did it for my kids. And long story short, it didn't, no one did it. And I remember that very moment where I was like, okay, I'm signing up for a private loan at, hold your pearls, 12% interest. $40,000. Actually, I did get a scholarship. So 30 grand at 12%, compounding. And, it was just one of those moments where I was like, I am, regardless of what's going on, I'm going to bet on myself and kind of power through. And within that year, I had so much incentive and so much um, just resilience around no matter what happened. I was just, paying off that student loan, all to just get to the point where I was like, okay, great. Now I've joined this one big obstacle and crossed that hurdle. Um, Went to culinary school, graduated, and then came the secondary part of the story. And that was me wanting to leave my corporate career. And while it looks so lovely, and even when I read my bio now, it's like great, but it's like that struggle to leave what was comfortable. School is one thing because I still was working, but to let it all go and then say, I'm going to figure it out, that was probably the toughest, most challenging thing that I've ever endured in my life. This fragmented identity, because I would do these shows and then I would come back to my corporate life, but this internal turmoil that was just, who am I? What is my identity? And, like, why can't I make a go at this? Like, money, surely money is one thing, but like there was some barrier that I just couldn't overcome to pull that trigger. Fast forward, as they say, whenever you're dealing with a issue in the present, you might find the answer in the past. And
Oh, is that what they say?
that's what, whoever they are, that's what they say. So current problems, you might want to explore something that happened in the past. And in fact, it
Mhm.
was through some really great therapists and counseling, through friends, I was able to kind of get to the crux of why I was so anxiety ridden, trying to do something that I was so naturally good at. And it was like every part of my being was trying to take me in that direction. And yeah, so once I had awareness around that, it was, shortly after where I said goodbye to those corporate suits and then the corporate card, unfortunately,
Mm.
and left and never looked back. So, I think when the story is told, it's told as had a corporate career and then I left, but it was so much more complicated and so much more complex than just up and deciding that I wasn't going to do that anymore. So, yeah, that's a
Mhm.
little window into the past that most people don't know about.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I love about these conversations and what you're being so willing to so vulnerably and authentically share, because to your point, anytime you're introduced to be at a public event, to speak, to be a celebrity chef as you are, and many other things, it's like that's what people hear in your bio, and it looks and appears to be seamless. And so giving us a peek into the angst, the anxiety, the sleepless nights to make that decision is incredibly powerful. And I'm curious to know for you, if you could give us a window into that period of time, what was happening for you when there was sort of an ever widening chasm between the life that you were living and the dream life that you were imagining? What was that experience like?
I think, you know, the life that I was living, I knew wasn't a right fit. I mean, I remember when winters would come around, I would actually want to get sick because I didn't want to go to the office and sit in a office desk and do the whole, I loved working from home because even if I had to work, I just didn't want to be around the politics of it. And I think that was my kind of window into this isn't working for you. Because if you're wishing for your health, people would give anything to be healthy. And the
Mhm.
fact that I was just sitting here, just being like, "Ooh, do I feel a tickle in my throat? Am I?" And I think that was kind of the moment of, or the realization that this isn't in fact working. And again, back to that, like it was just turmoil of like kind of what comes first. Like, do I jump and then the net appears, or do I wait for the net and then jump? um and I don't want to dismiss the actual reality of financial security. I mean, we still all have to pay bills, we still all need financial security. So I'm not saying to go out foolishly and just being like, I'm done. You do need, I was in my 30s at this point, so you do need some sort of game plan. But at the same time, the game plan can't be so debilitating that you're just churning and churning and churning. And I felt for many years that that's what I was doing, just kind of, this is going to be the thing, this is going to be the thing. Or maybe I just, I started dating someone and maybe it was, he offered for me to move in with him, which was a utter disaster, by the way. And it was like, no one's going to save you in that regard. It's your decision and it's your life to live.
Mm.
And so once you get behind that, then yes, the nets do appear, but the planning of it has to stop at some point and you actually have to go into action mode.
Mm. I love that. And what was it like for you? It was a very powerful part of your story about going to your parents, going to your uncle, asking for this loan, and for them to really turn you down. And what was it like for you to bet on yourself in such a significant way when some of the most important people in your life weren't willing to take on that bet?
Yeah, I think in that moment, I guess the it's now or never came to mind, and I was willing to do absolutely anything because I'm like, it just can't get any worse than me going to this job that I don't like. So, when they gave me financing options, they had a private loan. And in that mind, while I was disappointed, I was also relieved that there is another option that didn't come from a traditional means. It didn't have to be a mom, dad, or an uncle. And in fact, I probably even asked a close friend who couldn't do it. So, I went down the series of people that would support me or could support me for one way or for one reason or another because they couldn't. But then there was this beacon of hope of, just take a private loan and just for the year, just keep throwing money at it until it's paid off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And What was that experience like for you to bet on yourself? Was it empowering? Was it scary? Was it
Yeah,
both?
I think a little bit of both, because again, like that exhilarating feeling of, yes, I'm a student, yes, I'm in all white, and the first day of class was actually the first day, or my birthday actually, my
Hmm.
birthday. So, I had this beautiful dream just come to fruition. At the same time, I'm like, okay, I'm a student again, and I have student loans again. And while they weren't, in the six figures, it was still substantial for me. So yeah, it was a little bit of both. I think more just the joy, because I think once I'd taken that initial step, I knew that things would just kind of work themselves out, and I would get a raise, and then the next job that I took after that one, I got a significant bump, and was able to pay that, loan off very quickly, and then that was my last job.
Hmm. And you've been cozying up to hotter fires in the kitchen ever since.
Yes. Never met a stove I didn't like. Oh, that kind of
We have to figure out how many goofy kitchen metaphors I can make during this
Yeah.
time. Ah.
Yeah.
So there's so many people who are looking for their passion, maybe don't yet know what their passion is, or perhaps have identified their passion, but they're in that moment. I love what you said about a fragmented identity. They're in that moment maybe where they have a foot in two canoes, a day job and a passion, and the the finances or the pay, if you will, hasn't yet lined up with the passion.
Yeah.
So folks that are listening that are in that moment of either identifying their passion or trying to narrow the gap between what pays them and what their passion is, what advice do you have having gone through this experience?
Um, I think it would just be in terms of, for me personally, going into this job and just doing cooking on the side wasn't an option. For many people, it is. So I think you have to evaluate that for yourself. Not every hobby, not every passion turns into a full time thing. I think it's a common myth. However, it's whatever your true identity of, like, what you want to be, and if that true identity isn't what you're doing, irrespective of the work, you can be doing different, and many people do, they switch careers many times in their lives, but it's who you are that should be as true to yourself as possible. And if that's the case, then great. And if your day job makes you feel like that, great. If it doesn't, then reevaluate that. And maybe it comes in a form of doing a completely different job. It comes in following your passion and making that into a full-time job. But I think just being authentic and true to yourself, as far as your why of, what does this mean about me? And for me, the titles and all of that, which is really, when I really peel it back, that's what was more appealing. It's the big paychecks. It was, it didn't mean anything about me. I wasn't happy. And the job never made me feel like I was contributing in a meaningful way. And so that was my kind of North Star, so to speak, of being like, this isn't for me. And as I say to a lot of people that have a lot of angst about leaving their job to do other things, I, I phrase it this way: there is someone who is dying for your job.
Hmm.
That, like, your job that you're trying to leave behind is somebody's dream job. And the longer you're in it, they can't get in there. So as you move out, it makes room for someone that could actually come and enjoy what they're doing. So by virtue of just being there, taking up space, not enjoying it, I feel like you're kind of robbing the next person that's like, great, that's all I've ever wanted to do in my life. So, you know, just make the way for someone else to enjoy and maybe have their dream career.
I love how you've created this like mental mindset of creating a win-win. Like if you can't do it for yourself, and oftentimes we can't do it for ourselves, be of service and do it for someone else.
Yeah. And I gave this advice to my best friend because she was struggling. And I said, somebody coming out of PA school is going to absolutely love this job. And they would be so delighted for all the things that you don't want to do that they're adding on, and that's why you want to make the change, that somebody else could come in and take this on.
Mm-hmm.
So
Do you have a sense of how you knew that food and cooking, how you knew that was your true passion? I feel like a lot of people also like are exposed to different elements and they're like, is this my true passion? Is,
yeah. I think you have to maybe one, if you can't do it for yourself, maybe consult dear friends and just see what lights you up. And in my case, I guarantee anyone that's been around me for any period of time will tell you, you know, I see a basket of vegetables or I see food and I see a bunch of people coming together. It lights me up like a Christmas tree. So that happens to be an easy way for me to know, oh, this lights me up and this doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a hard time, then just the people that are closest to you, I'm sure they have a front row seat into the things that bring you joy that you may not be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe they can shed some light on that because that's what people we love are good for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I like to ask people to go back to their childhood as well, to think about what inspired them as children. What were they naturally curious about? What did they gravitate toward? If we rewound time and went back to see little Chef Palak, in childhood, would we have seen you being naturally curious and excited about food and cooking and bringing people together?
Yeah, I think probably around age 6 or 7, when it was safe for me to get in the kitchen, I would insist on making tea for the guest. I would insist on making this dish that I used to make. I would take bread, white bread, and cut the edges and cut them up into pieces and then saute it with spices. And so it was a little dish I created, but I have such vivid memories of wanting to do that. I didn't. I didn't want to play with dolls. I didn't, you know, have all these things that I could have done, but that is what I chose to gravitate towards. So I think you just kind of look at the natural pattern of where you would go if, money, time, and all of these things were a factor that weren't a factor, then what would you do? And for me, it was that.
Mm-hmm. 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 A lot of coaches ask people a question. They say, what would you do if you couldn't fail? And and I've thought a lot about that question, and I wonder if it's the right question. And instead, I wonder if the question is, what do you love so much? What's been placed on your heart in such a significant way that you can't not try it? You can't not do it, even if failure is an option.
Yeah, I think that's a way better way to phrase it. Um, yeah, I mean, and then to everyone, trying to pursue their passion, that's what that statement means to me, is that cooking was so important that I was willing to make modifications in my life, in my lifestyle, um, in a holistic way to accommodate this new path, and no longer was living this kind of falsehood of, well, it looks good on paper, but it didn't look so good in my heart. And so, you know, I think that's the right question to ask.
Hmm.
If you would still do it, then that's your answer.
Hmm. And Of course, you and I have talked quite a bit about this idea of resilience and how we've experienced resilience. Could you talk to us about what have you drawn on in those moments where the dream's gotten difficult and what resilience has looked like for you?
Yeah, I think we just right before the call we shared something just in terms of when really you feel like the mountains are kind of coming down on you. One of the resilience practices that at least it works for me, is I will try to fast forward to worst case scenario,
Hmm.
because so often we are so afraid of worst case. And if you can get comfortable in that, then scaling back doesn't feel so big. It doesn't feel so helpless. And so once you get to that end state of being like, okay, what's the worst that can happen? And do your best. So, okay, great. And then what if that didn't happen? What else? And then you start to kind of scale down the problem, that it's like, okay, maybe it's this and not that, big mountain that you created. So it's a great way that I've found in terms of just being resilient to challenges, and just kind of taking a step back and looking at it in a holistic way of like, well, everything didn't break down like in my worst case scenario, only this did. And if I can handle that, then that's great. So, just reshifting the focus.
I love that. I love that strategy because if we can handle the worst case scenario, we can handle anything.
Yeah. It's most of a mental and emotional exercise of just so many times. Like the problem really isn't the problem, it's our state of being, how we respond to that problem. That's actually the problem. And so, kind of getting in the right mindset of not being ridden by this thing that is temporary, because all problems will evolve. That's just the nature of a problem. It will not be a problem forever. So I think just focusing on the emotional part of it more than the actual problem, because once you're right, the problem will solve itself.
Mm. All problems will evolve and it won't be a problem forever.
Hmm.
That feels good when I'm in a moment of problem.
Yes. Given I just experienced that, that is, everything evolves, and I have to remind myself of that constantly.
Mm. That's beautiful. Um, well, Chef Pollock, you're doing incredible work. We didn't even have a chance to talk about the fact that you're a vegan chef. What? How did we miss that?
Oh, well,
And I've seen you cook incredible meals for, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 people in Kenya in a little hut with a tin roof with baboons jumping on the roof.
best memory ever.
And you've also gone on national television shows um, with folks that I would associate with being red meat eaters, like Bobby Flay, and won the whole darn show as a vegan chef, which
In
is
all fairness, though, I did cook chicken. That was years ago before I took on my plant-based lifestyle. But
mm,
I have to say, I would still slay.
no doubt, no doubt. Well, there may be a part two for us to come back and chat a bit more. But for now, tell us, Chef Pollock, where can people find you, interact with you? How can they smell and taste and eat your food?
Yeah, well, the first one's easy. You can come to Dash and Chutney, which is my vegan Indian street food restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia. So you can stop by and say that you saw this podcast, and come and visit and have a delicious bite of plant based food. Second place you can find me on Instagram, handle Chef Pollock, and my website, which is chefpalakpatel.com. I think those are all the things. And then Dash and Chutney also has a website, but you can find that off of Instagram.
Beautiful. Well, for all of you who are in Atlanta, will be in Atlanta, would like to run, don't walk to your nearest air carrier and fly to Atlanta, please go to Dash and Chutney. It is seriously the most delicious food I have had. And if you have any doubts about plant-based eating, Chef Palak will forever make you a believer. And Chef Palak, I'm so grateful that we got to have you on the show today, that we got to peel back some of the layers of the hidden challenges that you faced and talk about fractured identity and making big bets on ourselves. And what an honor to have you share more of your story with me and with all of our listeners.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, love you so much.
Love you too.
Sorry for those of you, sorry for your ears. I just squealed.
So did I.
Thank you for being here. What a wonderful time with you.
Thank you.